Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Freckle webinar. My name is Hannah, and I'm on the team here at Freckle. And today we are going to talk about Freckle ELA and how it helps you differentiate instruction in ELA for each of your students. Before we get started, just a quick housekeeping item. If you have questions throughout the webinar as we go, feel free to go ahead and chat those in using the GoToWebinar Q&A box. I'm going to try to save a little bit of time at the end to answer at least one or two of those questions. So feel free to chat those in as we go. This is me. My name is Hannah, and again, I'm on the team here at Freckle. If you do have questions following the webinar, or if there is a question that I'm not able to get to that you type in, you can reach me or one of my amazing colleagues at any time at support@freckle.com. We really do take our support inbox very seriously, and we will get back to you as soon as possible so we can get all of your questions answered and get you up to speed with everything you need to know about Freckle. So before we jump in, we're going to spend some time today looking at the Freckle teacher dashboard and the Freckle student dashboard, and we're going to talk about differentiation in general. But to kick us off, I wanted to ask a question, and you can either just think about this on your own in your mind, or you can type it into the Q&A box and I'll watch the answers come in. How many reading levels are represented in your classroom? Is everyone in your classroom reading at the same grade level? Are they all on level? Or do you have some students who are maybe a grade or two behind in reading level? Maybe you have some students who are a grade or two ahead in reading level. Or maybe even more, maybe you have 3 or more grade levels behind or 3 or more grade levels above represented in your classroom. I see some of the answers are coming in already, and it looks like, to no surprise, we have a pretty wide spread of reading levels represented. I see lots of teachers here saying that they do have students who are 3 or more grade levels below and students who are, 2 or 3 or more grade levels above grade level in reading. So this doesn't really surprise us. We know that all of our students are different. They come from different backgrounds, they have different readiness levels, but a lot of our kind of traditional classroom methods, just the textbook, the worksheets, treat every student as if they're all the same. And that doesn't serve our students in the way that it could. Students who are above in reading level might be getting really bored with the content that doesn't challenge them. Students who are behind might be feeling like they're getting completely lost and they're unable to keep up with their assignments and their projects. And I think as educators, we can serve them better. So let's talk about differentiation. Not just Freckle in particular, but differentiation as a concept. How can differentiating instruction help our students in ELA? The most obvious benefit, of course, is reaching every student at their own level. When we're differentiating instruction and not just giving the same grade level textbook to all of our students, then we are providing an adequate challenge for every student. So if I'm teaching 5th grade and I have a student who's reading at an 8th grade level and I have a student who's reading at a 2nd grade level, it doesn't make sense for them to be reading exactly the same material. I want to be able to give my 8th grade reading level student something that's going to challenge her, and I want to give my student who's further behind something that's going to help her get up to speed without frustrating her or making her feel like she's never going to catch up. And additionally, I don't want my students in the middle to feel like they're completely invisible because I'm spending all of my time on the extreme ends of the classroom. With differentiated instruction, everyone is getting something that is going to be a challenge for them. So students are not going to get bored or left behind or feel invisible. The next way that differentiation can help is allowing students to really dig into material that interests them. If I give everybody the same textbook, then maybe some students are going to be interested in it and some students will not. But if I'm really differentiating instruction in my classroom, then I want to be able to offer opportunities for students to read things that are interesting to them. This is a great way to build a lifelong love of learning in your students, is allowing them to explore something they're passionate about. So if I have students who are really interested in technology and some students who are interested in food and some students who are interested in animals, then why not give them the opportunity to develop their reading skills and their ELA skills while they're learning about something that's fascinating to them? Another benefit of differentiation is that everyone, regardless of what level they're reading at, everyone's going to be able to participate. So again, if I go back to my student reading at an 8th grade level and my student reading at a 2nd grade level, If I use a differentiation platform like Freckle to give them the same article at their own adaptive levels, then they can both come to a class discussion the next day with interesting ideas about the content and something that they want to talk about, instead of the eighth grade student feeling kind of checked out and the eighth grade reading level student feeling kind of checked out and the student who's behind feeling a little too shy to speak up in class because she didn't really understand the reading. When we're differentiating instruction, everyone's going to be able to contribute, and that's a great feeling. And lastly, I think a sort of lesser known benefit of differentiation is the classroom culture. So when students see each other's strengths and see each other's different interests, then they're going to build more respect for each other. So instead of just seeing each other as good at school or bad at school or smart or not so smart, they're going to be able to say, hey, my peer over here did this really amazing report about sea turtles and it turned out great. And maybe we're not at the same reading level, and maybe reports aren't really my favorite kind of project, and maybe I'm not even interested in sea turtles, but that was a really cool project and I appreciate that that student was able to do that. If we have one student who's a brilliant writer and one student who's not so good of a writer but is a great presenter, then they're going to develop a respect for each other's separate skills. So instead of just good or bad, students are going to be able to see all of each other's different strengths and different interests as this kind of nuanced web of what it's about to be human. And I think that's really fascinating and something that we really want to foster as educators. So speaking specifically about Freckle, how can we differentiate ELA with Freckle? We're going to cover each of these in a minute. We'll take a look at what it looks like on the teacher side and what it looks like on the student side. The first way is our adaptive articles. Each of our articles is available in 5 or more reading levels. So if you do want to assign one article to the entire class, then it's okay if they're all at different levels. They're going to be getting their own version of that article. ELA skills practice is a way for students to really hone those individual skills. So as a teacher, you can select what domain you would like students to be practicing in, and they're going to get short reading passages, much shorter than the articles, and they're going to be answering reading comprehension questions related to those passages that drill down on those individual skills. Word study is a way for students to build phonics and spelling skills, really learn to identify letter patterns and word patterns, and build their literacy skills that way. And then lastly, we're not going to cover this in too much depth because we do have a separate K-2 training. So if you're a K-2 educator, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for that because you're going to cover this in a lot more detail there. But there are K-2 specific ELA practice modes that are great for your early learners to really build their foundational reading skills. So all that said, let's just jump out of this and jump into the teacher dashboard so I can walk you through some of these things. So this is what it looks like in the teacher dashboard. If you haven't gotten a chance to explore this yet, I highly encourage you to jump on in there and start poking around. I'm in the ELA section right now. So if you notice over here on the left-hand side, we have a menu. I've just selected ELA. And from here, I can choose what I want students to do. If I want them to read articles and stories, if I want them to practice specific skills, or if I want to build reader fundamentals, which is going to be those K-2 skills. Right now, let's look at articles and stories. So you can see we have nonfiction articles. We have a library of over 750 articles right now, which is growing every month. We're also going to be introducing fiction stories soon. So keep an eye on your dashboard for those to be rolling out over the next few months. We're very excited to introduce those. I think they're going to be a ton of fun. And just like the nonfiction articles, they're going to be completely adaptive. So let's jump into our nonfiction articles. When I'm ready to take a look through those, I'm just going to click over here on Assign an Article. I can search for an article if there's something I know I want my students to be reading about, maybe related to another unit that we're covering in another class. If I want to have students focus on a specific reading skill, then I can choose skills that will determine the reading comprehension questions that are associated with the article. So if I want my students to be practicing word meaning and choice, and I click on that, then I'm going to see the articles that have word meaning and choice as a skill in the reading comprehension questions. I can choose a genre if I want my students to be working on one of these in particular, and I can also narrow down by grade range. But right now, let's leave it completely open and just select this article on elephants. So I can see that this is in the science category. I can see the skills that are going to have the reading comprehension questions in this article. I can see what levels this is available at. So let's click into that and I will explain the levels a little bit more. I feel like looking at the different versions of articles is where teachers often have their kind of aha moment with Freckle. So let me show you that first. Right now we're looking at the 9A version of this article. So the way our text levels work is the number is the grade band that's going to be associated with this article, so ninth grade, and the letter is A, B, or C, which corresponds with the beginning, middle, or end of that grade band. So 9A is going to be early ninth grade. If I scroll through the ninth grade version of this article, I can see that the paragraphs are pretty long. I can see the writing prompt is going to be a little more complex. I see the vocabulary words are longer, enclaves, compassion, longevity. I can preview the reading comprehension questions and I can see what skills they relate to. So I can see this is going to be, if I have a student in my class who's reading at a ninth grade level, this is going to be what that student will see. It's a much longer article than some of the lower grade levels. So just for comparison, let's take a look at the lowest grade level this article is available in, which is early reader. So that's going to be more of a kindergarten level, kindergarten to second, depending on where your students are at. So here I can see the sentences, the paragraphs are very short. I have an audio play along option that the student will be able to click if they want a read along when they are reading that sentence.
Have you ever seen an elephant?
I'm not sure if you could hear that, but that was just the voice reading aloud. Have you ever seen an elephant? We have lots of pictures. We don't have a writing prompt at this level or the vocabulary words, and our reading comprehension questions are going to be much shorter. So that's what a student who is, maybe reading at a more of like a kindergarten level is going to see. And then just for comparison, let's go somewhere in the middle. Let's look at second grade level. I can see that this is very much in the middle. I have longer sentences and paragraphs than early reader, but not nearly as long as ninth grade. And the article itself is not nearly as long either. We do have a medium number of pictures. So those are what those different students are going to see. Now, when students log into Freckle and practice for the first time, then they're going to take a diagnostic pretest that's going to determine what level they're reading at. I will show you later on in our webinar where you can go to see all of those levels and also change those. So if you have a different reading level system that you use in your school that you would like to use to set your students' Freckle levels, that's something you can do, and we'll cover that when we get into our reports. But regardless, as your students practice within Freckle, Freckle is going to adapt to give them an appropriate challenge. So if they're kind of breezing through the articles at a second grade level, then Freckle is going to introduce more complicated text to them so that they're constantly being challenged as they grow. Now, this is what you would want to do if you wanted to assign this article. I can go ahead and click that assign button and I can choose reading or reading and vocabulary, and I can also choose to include that writing prompt or not. Adaptive level is going to be selected for you by default. I recommend sticking with that unless you really want to give all of your students maybe a specific taste of what it's like to read at, say, a fourth grade level or a sixth grade level. But adaptive level is going to just automatically deliver the appropriate version of this article to each student based on their own individual performance. So as I scroll down, I can see all of the students in my class and what level they're going to be reading at if I stick with adaptive level. And I will select all of those to assign this to. Now, if I wanted to get really granular, as the teacher, you do actually have a lot of control. So let's say I know that Neil has currently been reading at an early reader level, but I want to push him a little bit more because I think he might be ready to take on a greater challenge. If I want to push him up above what the program would automatically assign to him, I can do that. So let's say I want to assign the middle of first grade version of that article to Neil, then I can control that here. You don't have to do that for everybody. I would definitely say the easiest thing is to just go with what's automatically assigned to them, but that is an option for you if you choose to do so. And then lastly, you just click assign and it will show up in your students' dashboards and they will see that article ready for them to read. So that's how you assign an article. But you don't have to assign articles for students to read them. In fact, let's go over to the student dashboard and I'm going to show you what it looks like to read an article from the student side. So this is my imaginary student here and she is reading at a 3rd grade level. So if I click on ELA down at the bottom and I open up my article library, then I see all of these articles are organized by category. So maybe this student in particular is really interested in science. Then she has the option to choose a science article or any of these that she would like. This is going to be great for, if you want your students to read something of their choice that's related to their interests. If you want to give your early finishers something to do before class gets out, this is a great place to send them. So let's click on science and she's going to read a science article. Let's read about dinosaurs. Let's say she's interested in that. So we get to start with some vocabulary. We see our vocabulary word here.
Climate.
So that reads it aloud for us. We have the option to highlight a passage. So maybe she knows she wants to revisit that. Then she can go ahead and highlight that. As we scroll down, we'll see what all is included in this article. When you go back over here to the vocabulary, you're going to have questions that relate to that vocabulary word. So let's go through those quickly. We'll choose the sentence where the word fits. Let's choose an incorrect answer first and see what happens. So it shows us which answer was correct even though we didn't get it right. So I'll say, okay, I see. We move along, we see our next vocabulary word is reptiles. And let's click on the correct answer that time. Great. So now we get to read the article. You can see that the reading comprehension questions are hidden from the student until they've finished reading the article so they don't get too distracted. When we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's an option for them to click done reading when they're finished. And that's not available for me right now because I obviously just scrolled down to the bottom of the article really quick, and we don't want students doing that. So once the student has spent an appropriate amount of time on this article, then she can go ahead and click done reading and move along to the reading comprehension questions. When she answers those correctly, she's going to earn coins that she can later spend in the Piggy store, which, if you're not familiar, is the reward center where students can spend their coins on decorations for their little piggy avatar. And she'll also get a summary of how she did on that article, so she can kind of self-assess. That's really great for students' ownership of their own growth and goal setting. All right, those were our adaptive articles. So let's jump into the next practice mode, which is ELA skills practice. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to just show you this from the student side first this time. So if I go back to ELA and I click on skills practice here, I can see each of these different domains in which I can be practicing. And as students grow and gain more levels and make more progress in each of these domains, the little icon of their building will grow as well. So that's a really fun thing for students. Let's just go ahead and click on one of these. Let's say making connections. So I see my little tracker here. If I answer 2 more questions correctly, then I'll get my building upgrade, which is a really fun motivator for students. And I can see what I'm going to be practicing, knowing the order of events and steps in the text. Let's pick that up where we left off. We'll get to review this skill with a video, but I'm just going to go ahead and start practicing. So as you can see, this is going to be a much shorter passage than the article. So that's going to give students more repetitions of answering these reading comprehension questions. I'll show you what happens if we read this article and then answer the question. Let's choose the correct answer there and continue along. And then we're going to get another passage. It's also going to be quite short, so the student will read the passage and answer the question. Let's try answering incorrectly that time, so you'll see what happens when the student answers incorrectly. Let's choose another incorrect answer. So if they answer incorrectly twice, then they'll get to continue along. As students practice, if they continue getting incorrect answers, then they're going to get a review session, which is just kind of scaffolding them back a little bit to work on building up those skills before they move along further. So students can progress at their own pace. It's not going to get more challenging for them until they're ready for it and until they've shown that they can answer those questions correctly. Let's go back to the teacher dashboard and I'll show you what you can do if you want to assign this. So if you just have students go in and practice on their own, then you can tell them what domain to be practicing in, or they can choose on their own. Whereas if you want them to be practicing something in particular, you can go here to your ELA section and select Practicing Skills and Standards and click on Assign an ELA Skill. This is where I will select my students and their grade level. And this is where I will select my, my domain and standard that I want them to be practicing. So let's say my students really need to work on main ideas and they need to work on choosing key details to support a main idea. Then I can just go ahead and assign that from there, and the students will see the assignments in their dashboard when they log in. All right, really quickly, let's jump to word study. So I'm taking us back to the student dashboard. And I'm opening up ELA, I'm clicking on word study, and this is going to take us to a review of the short A and long A sounds. Let's turn my volume up so you can hear the audio play along.
Fill in the blank. I like to blank at the park.
In this section, we have the words written, whereas you'll see in future pages we might have a picture of the word, or we might just have the sound. So it's going to be lots of different challenges for students to work on those word patterns. So let's get this one correct, and let's get this one incorrect. It'll tell us to try again, and then we'll get it correct. So here's an example of, we don't have the word written out, we just have a picture and an audio button.
Twins.
So let's answer that correctly and move along. Here we get into sorting. So we'll be able to sort words by their ending letter sounds.
Scent, pond, ink, wink.
So students will be able to sort each of these words and they can play the audio if they like. Let's go ahead and just answer all of these correctly really quickly. They'll see when they get that correct. And here's another example of sorting, but this time we're only hearing the sound. We're not seeing the word.
Plate.
So students will be able to group those according to which category they belong with. For word study on the teacher's side, if you want to assign this to your students instead of just having them practice it on their own, you can do that. Again, you can assign that from this page. If we want students to practice skills and standards, we'll scroll down to word study and we can click assign. Another way to create an assignment, if you know what you want to assign, this might actually be a bit faster for you. There's multiple ways to do this, so you don't have to do it the same way every time. You can go to your assignments page, add an assignment, let's choose ELA, and let's just say we want to do word study. So we can click on that and create the assignment from there. Again, with word study, you can have students practice at their adaptive level, which is what is going to be selected by default, and that's recommended. Or if you want to give them all a specific taste of a specific grade level, then you can select that as well. All right, I'm going to really quickly breeze through the K-2 ELA products. So I'm going to sign in as my, my K-2 student so you can see what it looks like. But again, if you are a K-2 educator, then I encourage you to sign up for the K-2 training webinar because you're going to cover this in a lot more detail. But really quickly, you can see the K-2 interface is going to be a lot simpler. We're going to click on ELA, and I'm going to show you decodables, which is going to be our short stories or series of words and pictures that students can practice. And let's click on M and R. So each of these are related to specific letters or sounds. As I click through, I can see the word and I can see the picture. When I reach the end, there will be a quick question to answer. So let's just scroll through this really quickly. And then I will reach the end and see these two questions.
Which word begins with the letter M?
So if I answer that correctly, I'll see a little celebration. And if I answer the next one incorrectly, it'll let me know. And then once I've reached the end, it'll show me how many coins I've earned, and I can choose to move along. So the last thing that I want to show you for K-2 is sight words. We're not going to go into depth on this, but sight words is just going to be a way for students to practice recognizing and spelling the most common sight words that they're going to encounter as they become readers.
Let's learn the following words. 2. Let's spell it. T. O.
So you can see students will move through this and they will repeat this word and really learn how to recognize it and become comfortable spelling it. All right, we have only a few minutes left. I want to briefly touch on our reports really quickly for ELA. With ELA, you do have access to a wide range of reports. The first one I want to show you is the pre-test results report. This is where you want to go to see what level your students are at in Freckle. So we'll see their reading pre-test level. For example, Benjamin Harrison is at a 6th grade level and a 4th grade level in word study. If I wanted to change this, if I know maybe Benjamin wasn't trying very hard on the pre-test or kind of rushed through it, or maybe there's a different reading level system that I use in my school that I would prefer to use for Benjamin, then I can change that on my own in here, and you can do that at any point. I will also show you the ELA report cards. So I can look, this is great for preparing for parent-teacher meetings. I can look at my report card. Let's change the time period. I can see how my student has done in each of these skills. It's color-coded based on how proficient they have proven themselves to be with the reading comprehension questions. And I can even dig a little deeper into which articles they were answering these questions in. I can also reassign that skill to them if I want them to practice that a little bit more. And I can see how they've done with word study here as well. The last report I want to show you that you will use probably quite a bit in your class is the class groups report. This is where I can group my students by skill level, either according to their reading level or a specific standard. So this is really useful if you want to group your students for centers or for small group projects where you want your students to be reading the same text together and you want everybody to be working at their level. Then these are the students I would group together. And then I would see my students who are at a higher level, I would group those students together. And you can do the same thing for individual standards as well. All right, we are quickly running out of time. I want to get to at least one question here. So one of the questions that has come in that we see coming in a lot is what's the difference between Freckle's free edition and Freckle's paid school edition? The free edition of Freckle is going to give you access to all of these practice modes that we covered today. You and your students will be able to use the articles and skills practice and word study. The major difference is going to come into play with the reports. So when I was showing you the ELA report cards earlier, with school edition, you're going to have access to a lot more options. So let's look at this report card again. You saw when I changed the time period here. With school edition, that's something that's available to you. So you have a lot more options with these reports and a lot more control. So if I wanted to look at the student's performance for all time, I could select that all the way up through just today. Whereas on the free edition, you're only going to be looking at the past week's data. So if you're a teacher who relies really heavily on data, then school edition might be something you would want to consider because you have a lot more options with that. You're also going to just have access to more reporting capabilities across all of these reports. So when you get to a point with Freckle where you decide you want to use those reports more, then I would highly encourage you to get a quote for school edition for your school because that opens up a lot of possibilities for you. The other difference is with the ELA article library. I think I showed you there are over 750 articles in the library right now. Those are all available to you if you are on Freckle's paid school edition. If you're on free edition, you're still going to have a ton of articles, so don't worry, you're not going to run out of articles to read with your students, but you're just not going to have access to the complete content library. That's reserved for school edition customers. So those are going to be the major differences. If you have more questions about that or you want to learn more about school edition, just go to freckle.com. You can click on our plans. And if you want to request a quote for your school, that's something you can do there. You can also write into support@freckle.com at any point, and we'll answer all of your questions about school edition. So I know that was a lot of content in a short period of time. I hope everybody learned a little something today, and I apologize for all of the questions that I wasn't able to get to. Please don't hesitate to write us at support@freckle.com, and we'll get to as many of those as we can, as quickly as we can. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about Freckle ELA, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.